All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday as we kick off our mental awareness talks. And so we are so excited to have you join us on this Friday night as we just really emphasize why is this conversation important in the first place. As you all are coming in and you are seeing the different topics that we'll talk about this evening. As always, when we do our online conversations, the comments is really so this is an interactive conversation. This is not just a one-sided, we're teaching and sharing, but really an opportunity for you to also share your story, ask questions, be able to ask anything of us as to why are we even the people spearheading this conversation. And so as people are coming in, I first wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out to be a part of this conversation about mental awareness. If you don't know, May is Mental Awareness Month. And so just to kind of spearhead the month, we're going to start these conversations every Friday, along with speaking of some other programming we'll be doing throughout the month. And so I'm not going to hog up this space of the introduction. I definitely want each of the fine gentlemen who are on here with me to just kind of share as we kick off this conversation. But again, as you're coming in, put comments, questions, what's ups in the comments, and we will just kick it off. So if any one of you all want to continue with this intro, and then we'll move on to our first piece of the conversation.
Yeah, what's up? What's up? It's your friend over here, Damien Howard. Yeah, Jarima, I'm super excited to be here with you again. This is our second doubleheader. Wednesday, we rocked it out, just really having an opportunity to talk a lot about SEL, which is a topic that I care so much about. I think implicit in that work, when we're talking about social and emotional learning, mental health is one of those things that has to be a priority that we're dealing with in that space. Hey, people, it's your boy, Damie Dame, MLK of SEL. I don't know where I got that from, but it had a ring to it. So I went ahead and put it on there. That's all I got. What's up, people?
Hey, everybody. This is Phillip. I am Damien's business partner and working at Clever Characters, where we do a lot of work with social emotional learning, especially in Chicago. Jarima, thank you so much for having me on as well. Mental health is something that's near and dear to my heart. Have a lot to that's on my mind that I love to share, especially in light of the Mental Health Awareness Month. So really excited to jump into some conversation.
Yes. So I think before we get into our own personal whys as to why this matters, I think it's just important for us to even open up to why are we having this conversation about mental health. And so I would love for one of you all to kick off. Why does it matter if we talk about mental health, period?
So I'd like to start with maybe like some shocking statistics that might be kind of scary at first to hear about. In the United States, 31.9% of adolescents aged 13 to 18 had some kind of anxiety disorder last year, and major depressive disorders have been going higher and higher every year within our youth. Ages 12 to 17, suicide rates have increased in the last 10 years, jumping up almost 300%. And in every age category, we're seeing suicide rates go up and up. And so just from an impact standpoint on the what it's doing to lives, and also to, just general wellness, mental health is real, right? It's incredibly real, and it's hurting people and it's hurting families. So kind of starting with that sombering statistic, I think helps frame like, why are we talking about this? What's so important about having this conversation?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to just jump in there and add is that I think it is very helpful for us to speak to the fact that when we're talking about mental health in general terms, that isn't a bad thing. Sometimes there's this stigma that this is something that we shouldn't be talking about. Mental health is a spectrum of wellness, just like physical health, just like emotional well-being or health in that way, or health in any ways, relational health. Even when I think of my ability to relate well to my wife, there's a spectrum, which means that we can be all together like super tight, off the chain when it comes to our connectivity. But then it can be on another end of that spectrum, whereas it could be very chaotic. We could just be missing each other when it comes to our communication. So again, I think that's one thing that I want to interject into this space, that's speaking generally about this topic of mental health, that it's a spectrum of wellness, right? And the beautiful thing about said spectrum of wellness is that we can effectively have intervention to be introduced into our lives and into our spaces. And an effective intervention has the ability to help us to shift to more positive places on that spectrum. So one thing I wanted to jump into the conversation.
That's why I love you, Damien. I'm kind of an extremist, and so like I go straight to the deep end. But
we need that though. Totally we need it.
Yeah.
No, those stats were off the chain. Like, I mean, like helping us to get that perspective concerning how important this conversation is absolutely helpful. So
right.
Glad
you bring up a great point. Mental health is for everyone, right? It's not just for the people who, have some diagnosed disorder, but it's for everyone, everyday living.
Yeah, I think the thing I would want to add is just that understanding that having, I don't want to say like issues with mental health or things arising can come based on multiple reasons, right? And so we heard the statistics. So some of it can be like neurology, like your brain and like imbalances, and all those things are true when we have medications. But I think also trauma that can occur through your life can hit. I think we'll hear a little when we share our stories. Things that happen throughout our lives can impact whether or not we feel like we need therapy or we need some kind of other outside support to help us through situations. So I think for me, the reason this conversation is important is because some of us can feel like we are exempt, and that saying I have an issue mentally means I'm crazy, or it means that I'm unstable, that there's a weakness that's attached to that. And so I think it's just important that we kind of take the stigma away from mental health and understanding that there are many reasons why people will need extra support. Not only just like, as Damien said, with his family and his, marriage, but it could be just for me to be able to be a functioning person in society. Everyone needs some type of support in order to make it through.
Absolutely.
Yes. So as we dive into this conversation, just as people are listening in, this is really an opportunity for you to get to know us and really our why and why we're going to create these spaces that we'll talk about later on. And so we have decided to share a little bit of our stories. And so you to learn why this may be dear and close to many of us. And so to kick off our story time of just like who we are, we're going to start with Phillip. And so Phillip will just get the chance to kind of share with us, why is this topic so dear to him?
Yeah, I think when I'm thinking about my story, it's kind of convoluted. So if anything doesn't make sense, please interrupt and interject. And my experience and story with mental health has a couple of different faces, and I'll try to explain that as I share. But I was born in America, and my parents are both from China, first generation immigrants. And growing up, I've always had this dichotomy between like my American identity at school and my Asian Chinese identity at home. Mm. And for those who don't know in the audience or anyone out there, that there's this pretty deep stigma associated with mental health among the Asian community, whereby you might have seen like some foot massage posters, Chinese foot massage posters, where they have like a bunch of different dots and there's different organs attached to different parts of the feet. So one theory is that, in Chinese medicine, that there's no such thing as a mental health problem, right? If you have depression, that means you need to get a foot massage, and it's the lower right quadrant of your foot. If you press that one region, then you're going to be happier, something like that. And they just don't like to think about it, don't like to think that it's real. And so I grew up with that mindset throughout high school, throughout college, even beyond college as well. And I'm naturally a pretty anxious, high stress kind of person. And because of that mindset that I brought from, my culture, it was always extremely hard for me to talk about it and share, and it get bottled up year after year, get bottled up. And I didn't really know how to address it until it was 2 years after college. But in college, I was kind of going around in circles about what I wanted to do with my life. I started as a math major, turns out I only like math up to algebra.
Me too. Geometry and up, no.
Sure. Give me some X's and Y's, I can do that, but no shapes though. But yeah, and then second year I was a psychology major, and I enjoyed it, but I think at that time I liked more things that made logical sense, and so I settled with neurobiology. I really enjoyed kind of that harder science aspect of brain and behavior. And at that time, my big interest is like, why do people do the things that we do? Why do we behave the way that we behave? And I think that was for me a kind of an outside calling of my internal like passion and interest for mental health, right? But it was just disguised as in like a more general curiosity about behavior. And so I was in a research program in California for 2 years after that, doing some neurobiology research. And I figured out, that wasn't what I wanted to do at all. I didn't have any passion for it. And then I got into teaching. I had a high school friend who did Teach for America, and she really enjoyed the experience. And I did it as well in Chicago. I taught at Crane High School. That's where I met Damien, and we started our bonding towards social emotional learning. And teaching was a very, as much as I taught the students, they taught me 2 to 3 times, in return, just about life, about people, about myself. And there, I think it was when I really started to have a deeper appreciation of the importance of mental health and what that looks like for different people and what that could mean, and how culture can impact people, not just the color of our skin, but how we grew up, where we grew up, right? Whether I have some students, Crane is in a really special situation where we have students from both the West Side and the South Side. And I talked to my students about like the different cultures between the South and West Side, and just like the street that you grew up in had such a big impact. And I that really cultivated this, this kind of this curiosity about how development can impact the way that we think and the way that we behave. From there, after 2 years in Chicago, I wanted to get more in touch with my culture, and so I taught for a year in Taiwan, again with a real focus on student mental health, in kind of the relationships that I built with my students. After teaching for a year in Taiwan, now I'm in San Antonio in medical school with the big dream of being a psychiatrist to further understand what mental health means, what it looks like, and how can we treat it. And also like engaging in conversations like this, where we can talk about disrupting the stigma for mental health, and also doing personal growth along the way. I mentioned earlier that I never had an outlet to talk about mental health issues, whether that with my family or my friends. But just a couple of months ago in medical school, we have access to a free therapist, and I started seeing the therapist, and it's just so, just so refreshing to be able to share these things that I, never really had an outlet to share before. And if you asked, Philip 10 years ago whether he'd go to a therapist, he'd be like, no, I'm a man. I don't need to go to a therapist. Kind of like you were saying earlier, Dream. If I went to a therapist, I'd be crazy. No one would respect me. I'd be, down the deep end. And now when I reflect on that, it kind of makes me sad that there's other young men and women who think similarly, that if they go to a therapist, then, they'll be judged, and that stigma that's associated with it. But now it just reinvigorates kind of this fire, this flame in me, that it's so important to promote the wellness of our students, to disrupt that stigma, and so that we can build a safer culture. And just tying in with kind of what I brought in with about my culture earlier, also disrupting that stigma in the Asian community. When my mom asks me what kind of doctor I want to be, I said, every time I tell her psychiatrist, I think she wants me to change my answer. I know what she's expecting. But she says, like, if you become a psychiatrist, then you're going to be crazy because you're going to see, crazy patients. And I tell my mom, no, because it's exactly what you said earlier, Damien, that it's more than just like being diagnosed with schizophrenia, right? Mental health is something that's just daily, that's part of us, that is us. And I dream that one day, just like how students and people understand that when you get a common cold, you need water, you need rest, people will understand that when you get an episode of depression, you need to talk to someone that you love. You need mental health days, right? And that it's just a normal part of life and that there's nothing wrong with it. So that's kind of I'm sorry if I kind of went back and forth.
Oh.
But, I hope that provided some clarity. And I'm really excited to see where the story comes next and how that continues to grow and develop.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think you hit some major things that the reason I love people sharing their stories because I believe that we are able to see we are more alike than we are different, right? And you even sharing a lot about just like the stigma that comes with it within the Asian culture. There's definitely a stigma within the Black culture when it comes to therapy and getting help. And this can lead a lot to I can share next my story. And so I was trying to think of what would be the one um, example because I think for all of us we could share multiple reasons why we think this is important. For me, I would say is similar to what you shared about understanding that when things happen in our lives, it's okay to get an outside perspective and help to help us. For me, growing up, very similar, being able to get help when things happen was very much so like an inside the family thing, right? So you talk to your mama, you talk to your friend, and if after that you just kind of push through it, right? Because life happens, things happen, people die, occurrences happen, and I think that has aided a lot into me growing up. This whole idea of connecting, having issues or having things linger too long means that there's something wrong with me. Like something that's a weakness with that. We would joke a lot in my friend circle. I was the one that really didn't cry, didn't really take things, and I would say stuff moved me. I was like, oh, that was moving, but it didn't like make me cry. And I took pride in that, right? I took pride in that I could easily get over things. However, as I got older and as things happen, there are certain things that occur that guess what, you can't just shake it off, and my very first occurrence that happened that was major for me is when I had my son. So when I was pregnant with my son, very smooth pregnancy, everything was fine, to the point that he just didn't want to come out. And so the doctor's like, you know what, we're gonna have to induce you if he doesn't come out this certain date. This is the date we have set. At the time I was married, so me and my husband were like, okay, well, this is the day we having them. Excited having our first child, a boy that we both wanted. And going in, I went in that Thursday to have my son. Thursday came and went. I was still pregnant. Friday came and went. I'm still pregnant because my son doesn't want to come out, right? So they're doing like all these procedures, all these different things to try to induce me. To the point that now they're like, okay, let's try this because they want to avoid a C-section at all costs. And so I'm like, okay. By like day 2, though, I'm like, okay, what is up? Like, what's going on? And to make a long story short, it ended up being that they started doing all these different procedures to get me induced, that I started to raise a fever. Like, so I started having like a reaction to some of the things. And it also started to kind of alarm them about Trey. And so they said, you know what, actually, we're going to just, give you up the door. We're going to have to do a C-section. And so it kind of worried me because at first I'm like, okay, everything has been smooth and I felt a shift in everyone started their demeanor. Like, okay, we got to hurry up and try to get this baby out. Got there Saturday morning, go in to have my son. I'm on the table having a C-section. And when you envision like your son is going to come out as like this loud, like, crying or whatever, we heard no sound when he came out, right? And I didn't even really notice it because I was kind of out of it. My husband did at the time. So they literally, when they took him out, rushed him out. Like, we didn't even get to see him. Like, they just like took him out to the side. I'm kind of on the table. And so my ex-husband at the time, now told me that he remembered that moment feeling like, what's going on, right? Because they took him, they didn't show him. I'm on the table. They're like, he's like, I was freaking out. They take me to recovery, come to find out that really like the rising of my temperature and like all the things with the being induced impacted Trey to the point that he was on like a respirator, like breathing, right? And so they took him to the NICU. And so literally for the first 3 or 4 days being in the hospital, I didn't even see my son, right? Like he's in the NICU. My husband would go down there. My mom would tell me about it. And I remember being in the hospital and the nurses kept checking on me, right? They kept saying like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm all right. And they, okay, just checking on you. And like maybe by like the 4th day, I was able to go down to see him for the first time. Seeing him, he had like the tubes in his nose, like his first pictures I have of him, he has like this breathing and I had to like pump to give him milk. And it's like, oh my gosh. So when they were releasing me to the hospital, not only did the nurse come, there was another doctor who came in and they were talking to me. And they started talking to me about like postpartum depression, right? And so she's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, oh, I feel fine. So she just started talking to me, saying that women who normally have very traumatic or very, intense pregnancy, like deliveries, can fall into postpartum depression. So she was just like, I just want to give you these resources. These are kind of the signs, these are, if you need it. And at the time, like, I'm fine. Like, what are you talking about? And it was just as if something shifted as soon as I ended up leaving the hospital. Because he's in the NICU, he didn't come back. He didn't come to our home till maybe like a week later because they still had him. So we were traveling back and forth. And I felt the shift in me, in my body and my emotions, and to the point that when he did come home, I did start suffering from postpartum depression. I just couldn't stop crying. I tend to be a very strong individual, period. And so, but I felt so weak. I felt like I didn't know what to do. I felt, all these different inadequacies when it came to being a mother. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't feed them because, this and that. And I remember one day my mom coming, because she was retired at the time, coming to help me. And I told her, I'm like, Mom, I think I need to go to this therapy session. And she came and I started going to the hospital, going to the therapy session. And when I tell you, it was something about being in a space with other mothers who understood, right? So it was other mothers in that space where there was no judgment, there was no, the doctor was very like understanding. And I think for me, it wasn't even so much I needed someone to validate that, yeah, you are kind of going through a thing, but I just needed to have a community, right? Like I just needed to know that there's a lot going at home, but there's a space I can come and talk to and, get advice. And it was through, I'm so serious, like through my mom being there and through me going to this therapy and other people checking in. They were the ones that told me like, no, you need to get people involved, like get people to come to the home. Like you need to start resting more. You need to do this. And all of those advice tips helped me. And and I look back and I'll see movies and I'll see things, people talk about postpartum. I'm like, that stuff is real, right? But we can act like it's not, and we can act like if someone is suffering it, then, like I said, that's stigma being weak. Like you're a mom, you're supposed to figure it out. And that began my love for therapy, because what it taught me is that it's not so much about whether or not if I can handle it, if I'm weak. It's really about me getting the tools that when I'm in a situation, I know what to do, right? Like when she was telling me, okay, these are things to look for or look out for when I start seeing those signs, I didn't feel helpless. Right? Like I knew, okay, this is a trigger for me. I need to tell someone before something does happen, or, what, I am feeling overwhelmed. I need to call this person. And so it was just so helpful. And it led me to who I am today, where my son is 8, he's perfectly fine. Life, things are thriving. But now I go to therapy by choice because it's not because something is wrong. It's because I want to keep things right. Right? Like it's not because I have this traumatic experience. It's because I think it's important that whether things are high or low, you have a community that's helping you process and just kind of unlearn some things. And I think that I had to see that my culture in many ways has gave me a lot of resilience and strength. And I got that grit and ain't nobody shake me. But I also had to understand that there's nothing wrong with saying I need a pause and I need a break. And when I take my break, I know what I need to do during that break. You know what I mean? I don't have these unhealthy vices that I'm going to try to get through it. So that's a little bit of my story. And I'm just excited because I think that we need to have spaces where people can talk and be able to have that conversation. And it gave me freedom that when other people are going through things, I'm okay with sharing my story with them, because I think as much as they hear other people share their stories, they can know that they're free to share their own. Right?
What a powerful story.
Thank you. As we go to Damien, the MLK of SEL, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not know? You know, how did I not know? I'm going to read a comment that just came in. Yes, resources and a safe space communities are necessary for healing. So true, Erica. I truly believe that a lot of the issues we have in our community and our families because we don't feel like we have those safe spaces to just be uncensored so we can heal, right? We need to have a space where I can be my raw self and be able to get the resources that I need. And so now we're going to go to Mr. Damien and his story and what led you to SEL.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm certainly going to jump in here. One thing I want to say, Erica, to the comment that you just made, make sure y'all, as y'all are watching this, because there is such a unique ability for a story to tap into just different feelings and different things that maybe you didn't even know that were there. So even as our stories are even helping you to engage different spaces within your own psyche, within your own state, I just wish that, you know, y'all would kind of come in, help us to understand, you know, over time, what are some of those resources when we're coming here on Friday that we should be sharing? Like, for instance, Eric, you said resources and safe spaces. I would love if you would elaborate more. I see a lot of people coming in. What's up? Shout out to Queen Lisa Sparks as well. When y'all are talking about this healing and how important that is, let's tease that stuff out, because the more that you all are very descriptive and helpful for us in these comment sections, we can make sure that as we come every week that we are hitting you all with tailor-made commentary that's going to be right on, spot on with what the community is saying we need to talk about more, what the community is saying we need to be doing more in order that we can all collectively make this a space that we find healing together. So with that, I just want to trek very quickly into one dynamic of my story. It took me into the age of 30 for me to find a mentor. Phillip knows this gentleman. I thought that the mentor would be somebody who, I'm going to tell y'all exactly what I had in my mind. A 50-plus-year-old African-American man who was a pastor. I just knew that somebody that fit that profile would find me, take me under their wing, and just love on me and hit me to finances, hit me to how to be a good husband, hit me as it pertains to how to be an excellent entrepreneur. Like, I was like, it's going to be a 50-year-old pastor out there somewhere who's going to have everything I need to help me to develop into the best version of myself. Guess what, y'all? I never found that gentleman or he never found me. But what did happen, and the blessing that I was able to have interjected into my personal space, is that there was this gentleman by the name of Mark Chasman. And he is totally different than the profile I had in mind. He is not Black at all. He's a Jewish guy. He's about, you know, that age. So that piece worked out. But I mentioned him because a beautiful dynamic that happened as I met him and as I connected to a program that he was a co-founder of called the Emerging Leaders Initiative is that I was able to identify and articulate my own personal purpose. And not only that, that process and connecting with him on a weekly basis, and I still do that 7 years after initially meeting him, almost 7 years after initially meeting him, that process helped me to deal with my own personal insecurities that I didn't even know were there. And as I started to learn of the fact that I had these insecurities that were stopping me, that were blocking me, that were causing impediments in my life, then now that cognizance of, Damien, you think less of yourself. And since you think less of yourself, you have, for whatever reason, some trepidation when it comes and talking to principals or talking to schools about the work that you do. You think that your work has a lot of value, but there's something in your mind, there's something about how you think of yourself that makes you feel less than adequate when it comes to doing those type of things that allow you to share your story, right? Because there was always, right, even in my 20s, even as a teenager, of me feeling as if there was a revolutionary that's nestled inside of this shell right here, right? But juxtapose that with this timidity, right, that I called humility, that did not allow me to go out there and fully express myself with the fullness and with the most true articulation of who it is that I am. Because once more, and not even knowing this, I didn't believe that I deserved to be that dude that God made me to be. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He made me to be that type of dude who does have the ability to go out and bring transformation to communities. He made me to be that dude who has the ability to grow programming alongside my partner here, namely Phillip, whereby we can be a factor that impacts positive change, not only for schools here in Chicago, but that impacts the whole urban education system. Like literally, those are components of me capacity that I have that has been muzzled, that has been limited because of my own personal insecurities. So that's just one thing I want to bring into this space, is that it took me to connect to Jarima, Phillip, both of you all talked about having nurturing figures, outside folks that we trust enough, and community spaces that we found ourselves in to help me to think even of myself differently than I thought of myself before. Somebody who was able to say, Damien, you, bro, like got something in you. You like, I remember one of the conversations I had with him, and he said something I had never heard before, and it triggered something in my shondo. He was like, you're going to be a millionaire. And I promise you, there was nothing in my lived experience, especially the way I was brought up, no financial knowledge. I talked about a lot of that Wednesday, so I'm making sure that I give y'all a remix and not reiterate just what we already talked about. But it was nobody who ever told me that. Matter of fact, beyond that, there was no way that I ever conceptualized that I can be that, right? Yeah. So in somebody being able to see something in me that I couldn't see in myself, it started unlocking stuff. And part of what it unlocked was also those scary, dark, negative, decrepit realities that tell me, or that have caused me to think of myself as less than, as a person who doesn't deserve what it is once more that God made me for. So another thing I just want to really throw into this space, man, so positively impacted as you all were sharing your stories. So appreciative of the folks who are coming in and commenting in the comment section as well. So helpful to see some of our friends just commenting in that way. Is that me having greater clarity as it pertains to who I am, because I've been working on my mental state and my emotional state, has allowed me to experience a life and a lived experience that's vastly different. That is so much an upgrade from that person I was before going on this journey. And three things that's kind of come out of that for me is that increased faith, which means that this is an ability for me to believe that things are possible that once before, for whatever reason, I didn't think that those things would be possible for me, that I couldn't accomplish them. And then secondly, finances, right? I'm having new streams financially because I'm living in my purpose, and people are saying, man, I see value, Damien, in you being you. And then lastly, I just got greater fulfillment in my life because I took mental health seriously. I took that component of, Damien, you have to deal with your insecurities by infusing positivity into your mental space, empowering your psyche to think of possibilities that are vastly beyond what you initially thought. And then now, again, I'm just a different person. I'm a happier person, a more fulfilled person. Finances, I have new streams. And then, like I said earlier, I just have a belief system that's off the chain. So just wanted to interject that into this space by way of my introduction.
Yes, and I think what I'm putting up on the screen is the perfect segue to talking about our parent hangouts. And so Erica put, so many are raised with a limited view of who we can be and what we can become. It requires exploration, faith, and discovery. And the reason I say this is a perfect segue is because I also believe that when we start talking about these parent hangouts, a big piece of some of that insecurity, and I'm only going to speak for myself, can come from the way we were raised. right? And so I think the way we are raised not necessarily feeds us to believe that we can't do certain things, but just like you said, just some of the lived experiences, maybe some of the lack of exposure or maybe overexposure to certain things impact what you think is for you and what you think is not for you. Also, it impacts who you think you can be as a woman, who you think you could be as a man, who you think you could be in the areas that you live in. Like also when you talked about, when you talk South and West Side students, we joke about that and that the South Side is very different from the West Side, but that is a very true statement. And it's not true. I mean, it's not in a slight, like, okay, if I'm from the South Side, I'm better, even though I'm trying to keep it as neutral as I can. I'm just saying I'm just South Side born and raised. But but again, there is different lived experiences, right? Because I have friends that live on all sides of the city. But I think it's important that we realize that a lot of my first lessons of what it means to be in this world comes from my home, right? And so as I'm now a parent, I know that my lived experiences and the things that I do and don't do and the exposure that I allow my son to see is impacting how he's viewing himself as well. You know what I mean? And we talked a little bit about this on Wednesday as well, is that it's important that we're saying during this time of quarantine that, we got all this time to be with our families, right? We got all this time to be with our children. We got all this time to reconnect. But if we haven't yet found a healthy way to do that, in some cases, it can be more damaging than good, right? I have some students that I keep in contact with just because I knew before this quarantine, them and their parents did not have the best relationship. And so it can be magnified that now we're in these close quarters and neither one of us have learned how to better communicate and how to interact with one another. And so I'm excited about these parent hangouts because the reason we're doing this talk on Friday, you all, for today, going forward, we definitely will have different topics that we're keying in on, but we really wanted to know, what do you all need, right? When I think about me as a parent, I seriously want to know how I can, as a mother, be a best support to my son. I know that that's a different dynamic, right? And I don't ignore that. And I believe I do the best I can, right? And I believe that I'm open enough for critiques if people see something that I'm not doing the best. But I also know that not everyone has that space to be with other parents, to get that kind of feedback. And so parent hangouts, I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful team to just share what is the vision for that. And as I saw some people sharing in the comments, please tell us, if you had an opportunity to be in a space with parents, what do you think for yourself should be topics that are discussed, resources that should be provided, or what do you think our community and families need during this time? And I definitely will be looking at the comments as people write, but just kind of adding on, what are these parent hangouts for?
Damien, I'll let you take it because I'm unfortunately not a parent yet, but I'm taking applications for.
Hey.
So I'll drop my email in later.
Bingo, guys. Come on.
Your DM about to go crazy.
I know. He's like, hold on. I thought this was talking about something else. Okay.
All right. So here it is, y'all. Every Wednesday evening for the month of May, at least, probably there's going to be so much positive momentum that's going to build beyond May that we're going to take this into June and take it into the 2020-2021 school year. But at least for the month of May, our commitment during Mental Health Awareness Month is that we're going to make sure that we have a space that's tailor-made for parents to come to on Wednesday nights. And here it is. When I was talking to Jarima, one of her best friends, Shannon, Phillip and I were in that space, and some others, they said, Damien, don't be so lame, because here's where my lameness comes out. I like to just jump into these contents and just be all heavy on the content stuff. They said, bro, you got to come and have some fun first. You understand? So we're going to find ways that when we first come to, and that's why I just paused for a moment before talking about it, because I didn't deem myself to be the best person, because I'm not the fun dude. I'm like, let's just go and get into the work. You understand? But Jarima and Phillip have just amazing minds when it comes to how do we incorporate games, how do we incorporate ways that we come into that place first and foremost. And like Kirk Franklin and his friends say, smile. Do you understand? Have an opportunity that, man, I don't know what's been going on in my lived experience and on my space, but I know every week, y'all hear me, every week you will have a place that you can come to and just really hit the reset button, hit the valve that allows you to just kind of distinguish all of that negativity and just be free and be you, right? So that's what we're building on Wednesday nights, Wednesday evenings. The beautiful thing about this space is that it's so malleable and shapeable that you have an opportunity when you come to the space with your truest version of yourself to help us to imagine what it could and what it should be. I am going to tell you, particularly with the work that Phillip and I do when it comes to social and emotional learning, this parent hangout is something that we've been ideating for over a year, saying this is a must because we think that, and we know this will be a differentiator from what we do and other people who just drop programs on schools. So Dreamer, we're so happy that because you coming and joining us in this effort for what we're going to be doing on Wednesdays just adds so much positivity, so much ingenuity to that space. And I'm going to stop talking, y'all, because I'm so excited about this thing. I can keep going on and on about it, but this is my public service announcement that parents, all of you all come to this space. One other thing I got to add here is that we're going to also be intentional as we build out this space to make sure that we're offering different incentives. Because not only do we want you to come smiling, we want you to just be overwhelmed in such a positive way that I got good content, I got the smile, and I, was even able to, be incentivized in these different ways that we're going to bring to this space. It's just going to be awesome. So I am excited, Lisa, Erica, who are here. Rob, if you're still in the house, that if this isn't for you, that you all will help us to spread this word, spread this information. We're going to make sure that we get this graphic out soon. So be on the lookout for that. And please make sure that you're sharing this content, sharing this opportunity with other people. It's going to be an amazing space.
Yeah, and I just want to add so I put up topics for the month, and this is where we can begin that. And so those who are watching, and if you are watching, please share this video. What I have really appreciated by having these kind of open forum discussions is that people have just so many ideas and ways to contribute, and you are looking for a way to give and a way to be able to share your voice. And this is what we're trying to create. The other platforms of which I host, it's been so helpful because I can come with an idea. Damien, Phillip, we may think, okay, this is what is needed. And then as I'm reading comments and as conversations are happening, it's like, I didn't even think about that. Or, someone's like, well, you know what? I could do that part. I'm really good at that. Or I provide this resource. And so I want you to share it. The beauty of this is that if you're not watching it now, if you're watching this later, you can always comment and we'll see it and we can follow up. But I really want you to envision, like, man, a space for yourself. I always tell this to my students when, and sometimes it's like scary because they're like, I can do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah, just whatever you create, just show me that you know what you know, right? And so that in itself creates so many more excitement and ingenuity because I gave them the freedom to create, right? If I give you parameters, like it only could be a poem, it could be a report, it could be a presentation, and you're like, oh, which one I want to pick. But when I say you can create, like I've got whole full dances about things and poetry and engineering, right? Because I gave you the freedom. So parents, we're saying that, right? You have the freedom to create. So we're saying create a space for parents. What is it that you think that's needed? I know that for many of my friends who are parents, and I'm just going to kick off a topic. One of it is loss. I can tell you alone this week, and loss comes in many forms, right? So loss doesn't just mean losing an actual person because they're no longer alive. Loss can come with jobs. Loss can come with loss. I think we're all experiencing a loss of just freedom of movement, right? That does something to us, and it does something to our mental. And so I've had many conversations this week with individuals that I know personally who have either lost their security when it came to their job, they lost when it came to actual people in their lives that did pass away, but then also who feel like every day that when they get a update from Pritzker or an update from Lori, I'm learning something else I'm losing control of, right? And because I have no control of it, how I react to that is very, very different from household to household. For some of us, this is like a sabbatical for you. You feel like this is a reset. For others, you feel like the walls are caving in, and that's a real deal, right? And so one topic I think of is loss. I think that that's something that many parents, and then how do you help your children with that as well, right? So you're trying to figure out how to deal with it. How do you also help your household with it as well?
Especially because I watched a TED Talk recently on the topic of grief and loss, and it was just so powerful in that even our understanding of grief, just the way that we talk about it, might be flawed, where we talk about we need to move on from grief or we need to move on from a loss, when in reality the phrase should be changed to we need to accept it, right? We need to internalize it and we need to grow from it, as opposed to just saying like, I'm going to check this off after I compartmentalize it in whatever space in my brain, but rather it becomes a part of us, and to be accepting of that. So that'd be a fantastic topic for one of the sessions.
Yeah. Another thing, and so again, as people are and I appreciate Lisa, Eric, them saying they're sharing in different spaces. I appreciate that as well. I don't want us to also think. I think another stigma with mental health is that it's all gloom and doom, right? Like, I'm coming to this space because I'm sad. I'm coming to this space because I'm down and out. I believe this is also a great opportunity for us to think about new beginnings, right? And I think it's important for us to think about how do we really, in many cases, rebirth some things that maybe we've buried because we thought we, like, kind of going back to the Damien statement, like, okay, could that be me? Could this be what I'm able to do? Like, I'm excited because today, you all, I'm kicking off my health kick. Me and two of my best friends, we started a group. We got a group going together. We hold each other accountable, taking pictures when we've done our workout. I have not yet done mine, so my picture is coming. I'm sure they'll be getting on me soon, but it just renewed my mindset of like, oh my gosh, like if it's something about me I'm not happy about, what am I doing differently? But again, it took me having that group to kind of be that support for me of like, hey, maybe you can't normally go to the gym like you normally were able to do, or run around the blocks like you were before, but let's make it as best as we can. So I think it's important that we think about, man, maybe that new business, that new whatever, like this is like a new restart for me. And so how can we create those type of spaces for our parents? Because again, it allows us to be able to show our kids how we can make something from an idea become reality, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I just want to raise up that I see being celebrated in our comments here is just this whole concept of healing. It'd be very interesting that when we go back into our ideation spaces and we plan out future times to come into this space and be present so that we can serve the people that we're working with, for us to be somewhat intentional as it pertains to how does this space uniquely position itself so that when people come, they leave as a better version of themselves. Now, I know that that is a lofty ideal, but that's the type of way that I think. I talked to Phillip yesterday and I told him one thing that I call myself, other than the MLK of SEL, is that I say of myself, I'm an eternal optimist. And that's just how I'm wired. I'm always thinking that the glass is half full, and there, again, are positive ways that we can intervene into a situation or bring an intervention into a situation, and on the other end of it, experience something that's better than what once was. What once was. Almost a little tongue twister for your boy, but I went ahead and got that thing out. So I don't know. That's just really what's coming in my mind. I got on IG Live here. I don't never use IG Live. I said I'm gonna do that while I'm doing this. Just
look at you. Okay, Me either. I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna do better.
Yeah. Ain't nobody on there, but hey, I'm on there. So, hey, it's cool. No, but the point is how do we show up with authenticity, with vulnerability, with the truest version of ourselves, so that in spaces like this, through conversations like this, the folks that come get something that is a process or part of their process of healing. What that entails, we'll keep discussing that. People like Erica, y'all. Erica, she's a personal friend of mine, an educator, a therapist as well. So she is a person in this particular space that we're talking about right now who would have a lot to say. So that's my little contribution as it pertains to topics and ideas. If we're looking at what the community is saying, just healing is the thing that's being massively illuminated in my mind's eye.
Yeah, I love how, the practicality of that too, that we can take something from the conversation and, make ourselves or grow into like a better version of ourselves that very night. And one thing that I would love is to go on the opposite end and also have like a very theoretical, philosophical conversation too, and just like totally nerd it out about mental health and specifically thinking about stigma. Why does stigma exist? What does it look like? Dreama, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that there's stigma within the Black community for mental health, and there's I mentioned in my story there's stigma in the Asian community, and it's pretty clear that there's stigma in American Western society too.
Yeah.
But I bet it's the cause of this stigma is probably a little bit different for each of the varying cultures. So one of these days I would love to just nerd it out with y'all and with the audience too, and just like think about why, and get our philosopher hats on and just like talk about what is it about mental health that causes it to be something that's hard to talk about, that causes it for people to shy away from that kind of conversation and that kind of healing. I think that would be a really cool topic.
Sounds like we got at least a month of content right there.
I think so. So you all, I'm so excited. Again, we just wanted to come on today for everyone to meet each of us and how we are coming together to put this initiative together. And I'm so excited because similar to last month for April with Autism Awareness Month, it was just so important for me that we have more conversations about things that are impacting our families. And similar to what Phillip just said, I mean, those like philosophical conversations produce the next thing that someone maybe have not considered is a way of healing, right? A lot of these practices that we even do today with somebody thinking outside the box, like, what if we try it this way, right? Or have we considered how this is a trigger? And a lot of times it comes out of those spaces of just getting some brilliant people from all walks of life in a space to talk, and you just know what can brew out of that space. And so I'm excited because similar to what Damien said, I don't believe this is just same thing with autism awareness. We're not just going to be aware in April. We're going to be aware all year. The same thing with mental awareness. I think we just need to make this a regular conversation. And so I'm excited about how these parent hangouts will continue to grow and branch out, and having more brilliant people be involved so that really being able to make an impact in multiple spaces, I think will be exciting as well.
Yeah, Dreama, you said over here in the comment section. Definitely want to raise that up before we wrap up here.
Yeah. Say it one more time, Damien.
You see what I don't want to butcher her first name, but what Sister Betts
yeah.
in the comment section. That's powerful.
She says, I think it would be nice to talk about how long recovery takes. Sometimes there could be a feeling that we're not healing quickly enough, which can further exacerbate. Exasperate. Okay, exasperate by stigma. Yes, you know what? That right there, I think is a lot, because I think that a lot of times, like she mentioned, that how long does recovery take? And I think that there's this idea that and I think this goes in multiple. I mean, we could talk about this in multiple settings. How long, we live in a microwave society, right? We can feel like right away, give me the pill so I can be over it. You know what I mean? Give me the way to become a millionaire so I can get that money. Okay, how do I win her over? Tell me the tips. And I think that everything has stages, right? As I even spoke of, me going through my pregnancy and delivery and all of those things, yes, I definitely am far removed from that. My son will be 9 this year, but there are still layers of recovery and things that I had to heal myself from, right? Just because I know that he's now completely healthy and all that, I still, even recently, because I have friends in my life who are pregnant who talked about it, and them even talking about their pregnancy, like brought up some stuff, right? that I thought I actually was okay with. And there's areas that I'm definitely healed, but there's also areas I'm still growing in. And so I think that's important, that healing does not mean amnesia, right? Like that it just automatically goes away. I just think you just learn how to, that I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I think that it just means that I'm just continually learning how to grow and not forget it, but kind of make it a part of my story and being okay with that being a part of my story versus thinking absence means bliss, right? Like if I just act like it never happened, that means that I'm healed. But actually, I think me recognizing that it occurred to me and how do I deal with that kind of helps me to be able to heal more as well. I'm still chewing on that thought, but I like that point that you made. Yeah.
That's dope. You know, to the point that I was making up earlier, these are just some amazing, amazing comments that we're getting from the audience, from our viewers, that are just really going to help us, again, when we go back into the lab, you all, to chew on these things a little more. So very thankful for our guest today.
Yes. So she just gave us some places that we could look for further topics, and just even to what you said about stigma, Phillip. She said stigma exists because of culture and fear. People generally do not understand. And I think that even that could be a point that's brought up, and we can just chew on that and see what people think in these parent hangouts. But
yeah, one powerful part of conversations too is that we can help spread the word. Not saying that we understand everything, but by having this, shared conversation, that we can educate each other, educate the community, and help slowly chip away at that stigma.
Yay. So I'm excited, you all. So as you heard Damien mention earlier, we are going to take these comments, even as you watch this video later, or even now, maybe you are even processing what you would need in that space. Please put them in the comments. Please send them, and again, share it there, because it could spark maybe someone else's thoughts. And we're going to take your feedback, what we are able to just kind of process and identify what would be the topics for the month of Wednesday. So those will be coming out very soon. But do know every Friday at 6 p.m. we will be here. Each week it will be a different focus point, right? So today was more like a general get to know us, get to know what this space is. But going forward, along with those parent hangout topics, will also be the topics for Friday, so that you can really key in and know what you're coming to grab from the space.
Just one thing I want to say before we get out of here is I would ask any and everybody who's watching this live, or if you're watching this by way of playback, that before you so quickly go on to whatever your next thing is to ask yourself, it's the process within your own mental and emotional space. What was it that you got from this section or this, conversation that we had today, that can be an applicable point, something that you can put into practice, something that you can take and you can run with immediacy? And then the second thing I would just want you to reflect on is, how do you feel after us simply having a conversation and talking about mental health? I don't know about my guests here. They could talk for themselves, but I feel better. I feel better knowing that I had an opportunity to share my story even. There's power for me, therapeutic power in me sharing my story. So before you also hastily, exit out of this because our hour is over and go on to your next thing, pop your bag of popcorn, ask yourself, processing your own mental space, and ask yourself, how do I feel, right? And if your response says that I'm better than I was before I came to this space, then what that does is tell you that these type of conversations, coming to communal settings like this, that you need to do more of that. All of us need to do more of this. I admitted that I feel better because I came to a space like this. So I think it'll be very powerful, very helpful every Friday, you all, and Wednesdays as well, that we're taking an opportunity that even before we hastily end these settings, that we're asking people that question. How do you feel? How goes it for you right now?
I love it. Yeah. Love it. Thank you. So Phillip, Damien, thank you so much. Thank you those who tuned in, who shared, who gave your feedback, who gave your comments. They're definitely going to be used as we move forward. And again, share this video so that we can continue to spread. And I'm just excited about, because I believe just having small, look at you shout out the people with IG. Look at Damien. He's blowing up. I just think it's just so important that we're able to have these spaces, because again, as you share it, we'll get more people invested. And whether it's micro and it grows and grows and grows, just even having this small conversation made a difference, because guess what? If we didn't have it, maybe you would have been doing something else that didn't feed your mental health. And so I just look forward to where this can grow. The possibilities are endless. And so thank you all for tuning in. We're going to end out. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.